What would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about your son's death was a lie? That the boy you raised and buried wasn't just your child, but had left behind a legacy you never knew existed? This is the story of how a simple construction project on an Arizona ranch in 1889 would uncover a truth so powerful it would change one man's life forever, leading him on a dangerous journey to reclaim the family he never knew he had. Before we begin, I'd love to know, from which part of the world are you watching? Please write it in the comments. My name is Silas Whitmore, and for 52 years, I've called the Arizona Territory my home. I built my ranch with my own hands, raised cattle under the scorching desert sun, and watched my wife Martha birth and raise our son Thomas in this harsh but beautiful land. But 2 years ago, everything I held dear was taken from me in what seemed like the cruelest twist of fate imaginable. Martha died of consumption in the winter of 1886, and Thomas, my only child, my pride and joy, died in a mining accident just 6 months later. In the span of 1 year, I went from being a family man to a broken old widower, with nothing but memories and regrets to keep me company. The ranch that once echoed with laughter and conversation became a tomb of silence. I kept the cattle, maintained the property, and went through the motions of living, but inside I was as dead as the 2 people buried in the small cemetery on the hill behind my house. It was while building a new barn to store hay for the upcoming winter that I made the discovery that would change everything. I was digging post holes about 50 yards from the main house when my shovel struck something hard. At first, I thought it was just another rock. God knows this land has enough of them. But when I cleared away the dirt, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a wooden box, about the size of a Bible, wrapped in oiled cloth and buried about 3 feet deep. The cloth was still intact, suggesting it hadn't been there very long. My hands trembled as I pulled it from the earth, and when I unwrapped it, I found a leather-bound journal that I recognized immediately. It was Thomas's diary. I had given it to him for his 16th birthday, telling him that a man should record his thoughts and experiences for future generations. I had assumed it was lost in the mining accident that killed him, but here it was, deliberately buried on my own property. I sat there in the dirt, holding my dead son's diary, wondering how it had come to be buried in my pasture. Thomas had been living in the mining camp 20 miles away when he died. How had his personal belongings ended up here, and why had someone buried them? With shaking hands, I opened the journal to the first page and began to read my son's words, written in the careful script I had taught him as a boy. January 15th, 1887. I am writing this in secret because I fear that if anyone discovers what I have learned, my life will be in danger. I came to the copper mine in Bisbee to make money for Pa's ranch, but I have stumbled upon something far more important than copper. I have found love, and I have found a terrible injustice that I cannot ignore. Love? Thomas had never mentioned being in love. In his letters home, he had written only about work, about his plans to return to the ranch, about his desire to expand our cattle operation. But as I read further, the truth began to unfold. Her name is Ayanna, and she is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. She is Apache, which I know will be difficult for Pa to accept, but I love her with all my heart. She has a son named Little Wolf, who is 2 years old and has the brightest smile I have ever seen. The boy's father was a white man who abandoned them both, leaving them to face the prejudice of 2 worlds. I stopped reading and stared at the page in shock. Thomas had been in love with an Apache woman, and she had a child. I had always taught Thomas to be respectful of all people, regardless of their race, but I had never imagined he would fall in love with a Native American woman. The social implications alone would have been staggering. But as I continued reading, I realized that Thomas's relationship with this woman was the least of the shocking revelations contained in these pages. February 3rd, 1887. Colonel Blackwood came to the mining camp today with his soldiers. He claims to be tracking Apache raiders, but I know the truth. He is hunting Ayanna and Little Wolf, not because they have done anything wrong, but because Ayanna witnessed him stealing supplies meant for the reservation. She saw him selling government goods to Mexican traders and keeping the profits for himself. Ayanna is not a raider. She is a woman trying to protect her child from a corrupt soldier who wants to silence her before she can report his crimes to the authorities in Washington. She has been hiding in the mountains for weeks, but Blackwood's men are getting closer. I have been bringing her food and supplies, and I fear that someone has noticed. My hands were shaking as I read about the corruption my son had discovered. Colonel Jeremiah Blackwood was a name I knew well. He was the military commander responsible for maintaining peace between the settlers and the Apache tribes in our region. If Thomas was right, then Blackwood was not only stealing from the government, but was willing to kill innocent people to cover up his crimes. February 20th, 1887, I have made a decision that will change my life forever. I have asked Ayanna to marry me, and she has agreed. We cannot have a traditional ceremony, but we spoke our vows before God under the stars last night. She is now my wife, in every way that matters, and Little Wolf is my son. I know Pa will be shocked, but I pray he will come to love them as I do. I'm planning to bring them to the ranch as soon as it is safe, but first I must find a way to stop Colonel Blackwood. Ayanna has told me about other Apache women who have been killed or disappeared after witnessing his crimes. I cannot let this continue. I felt tears streaming down my face as I read about my son's secret marriage. Not only had Thomas found love, but he had found a family. This Apache woman and her child had been my daughter-in-law and grandson, and I had never even known they existed. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As I turned the pages, I found an entry that made my blood run cold. March 10th, 1887. I have discovered something that changes everything. Little Wolf is not just any child, he is my child. Ayanna finally told me the truth about his parentage. The white man who abandoned them was not a stranger. It was me. Last winter, when I was drunk in the saloon in Tucson, I met a beautiful woman and spent the night with her. I was so intoxicated that I barely remembered her face the next morning. I left town without a word, never knowing that I had left her pregnant. When I met Ayanna again at the mining camp, I did not recognize her at first. She had been living as an outcast, raising our son alone, facing the prejudice of both whites and Apaches because of his mixed heritage. Little Wolf is my son, my own flesh and blood. The boy I have come to love as a stepson is actually my own child. I'm ashamed of my past behavior, but I am determined to make amends. I will give him the love and protection that every child deserves, and I will give Ayanna the respect and devotion she should have received from the beginning. I dropped the diary and stared at the sky, trying to process what I had just read. Thomas had a son. I had a grandson. Somewhere in the Arizona territory, there was a 3-year-old boy who carried the Whitmore blood in his veins, and I had never known he existed. But Thomas had been planning to bring them home. He had been preparing to introduce me to my daughter-in-law and grandson, so why had he never arrived? Why had he died in that mining accident before he could bring his family home? I picked up the diary again and continued reading, searching for answers. What I found made me understand that Thomas's death had been no accident at all. March 15th, 1887. Colonel Blackwood knows about Ayanna and me. One of his informants saw us together and reported back to him. He came to my cabin tonight with 2 soldiers and told me that I had 24 hours to turn over the Apache woman or face charges of treason for harboring an enemy of the United States. I told him that Ayanna was my wife and that she was innocent of any crimes. He laughed and said that marriage to an Apache woman was not recognized by the territorial government. He said that if I did not cooperate, he would have me arrested as a traitor and ensure that I never saw my family again. I have hidden Ayanna and Little Wolf in a cave in the mountains, but I know Blackwood will not give up. He is planning something terrible, and I fear that all of our lives are in danger. If something happens to me, I pray that someone will find this diary and understand the truth. The final entry was dated March 18th, 1887, the day before Thomas's supposed accident. Tomorrow I am going to confront Colonel Blackwood and demand that he leave my family alone. I've written a letter to the authorities in Washington detailing his crimes and his threats against innocent people. I have hidden the letter in a safe place where it will be found if something happens to me. I am burying this diary on Pa's ranch, in the place where we used to practice shooting when I was a boy. If I do not survive, I hope that someday Pa will find it and understand what really happened. I hope he will forgive me for my mistakes and help me protect the family I have come to love. Pa, if you are reading this, then I am probably dead. But please know that I died trying to do the right thing. Ayana and Little Wolf are innocent. They are good people who deserve a chance at a peaceful life. I pray that you will find them and give them the love and protection that I can no longer provide. Your son, Thomas Whitmore. P.S. The letter is hidden in the old oak tree by the creek, carved into the trunk behind the loose bark. Use it to bring Blackwood to justice. I closed the diary and sat in the dirt, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd just learned. Thomas had not died in an accident. He had been murdered by Colonel Blackwood to prevent him from exposing the corruption and protecting his Apache family. But more than that, I had a daughter-in-law and grandson who were somewhere in the Arizona territory, probably still hiding from the same man who had killed their husband and father. They were my family, and they were in danger. I looked up at the sky, where the sun was beginning to set behind the mountains. For 2 years, I had been living in despair, convinced that my family line had died with Thomas. But now I knew the truth. I had a grandson named Little Wolf, and I had a daughter-in-law named Ayana, who had loved my son enough to marry him despite the social barriers they faced. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my clothes, and walked toward the old oak tree by the creek. If Thomas had hidden evidence of Blackwood's crimes, I needed to find it, and then I needed to find my family. As I walked through the gathering darkness, I felt something I had not experienced in 2 years. Hope. Thomas was dead, and nothing could bring him back, but his family was alive, and they were my family now. I had spent 2 years mourning the past. Now it was time to fight for the future. Chapter 2. I found the letter exactly where Thomas had said it would be, carved into the hollow of the old oak tree by the creek. The bark had grown around it slightly, but the oiled cloth wrapping had protected it from the elements. My hands trembled as I unfolded the pages, written in my son's careful handwriting, but with the urgency of a man who knew his life was in danger. The letter was addressed to the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C., and it detailed systematic corruption that went far beyond what I had read in the diary. Colonel Blackwood had been stealing supplies meant for Apache reservations, selling them to Mexican traders, and pocketing the profits. When Apache families left the reservations in search of food their government had failed to provide, Blackwood would classify them as hostile and use their desperation as justification for military action. But the most damning evidence was a list of names, Apache women and children who had witnessed Blackwood's crimes and had subsequently disappeared or been found dead. Ayana's name was on that list, marked with a note that she had seen Blackwood's men loading stolen goods onto wagons bound for Mexico. Thomas had been thorough in his documentation. He had recorded dates, times, locations, and even the names of the Mexican traders who were buying the stolen supplies. This letter was not just evidence of corruption. It was evidence of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the territorial military command. I read the letter 3 times, burning every detail into my memory. Then I carefully folded it and placed it in my jacket pocket. This evidence would be crucial in bringing Blackwood to justice. But first, I had to find Ayana and Little Wolf. The next morning, I saddled my horse and rode to the mining camp where Thomas had been working. The camp was smaller than I had expected. Maybe 30 men living in crude shacks and tents, extracting copper from the rocky hillsides. The work was dangerous, the conditions were harsh, and the pay was barely enough to survive on. I found the camp supervisor, a grizzled man named Murphy, who had known Thomas well. "Silas Whitmore," he said when I introduced myself. "I'm sorry about your boy. He was a good worker and a decent man. That accident was a damned shame." "I'm not convinced it was an accident," I said carefully. Murphy's expression changed. He glanced around to make sure we were alone, then leaned closer. "What makes you say that?" "I found some of Thomas's belongings, things that suggest he was involved in something dangerous." "Mr. Whitmore, I liked your son, but I've got to tell you, he was asking a lot of questions in the weeks before he died. Questions about Apache raids, about military supply wagons, about things that weren't really his business." "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know if anyone had seen Apache women and children in the area. He was asking about Colonel Blackwood's patrols, about where the supply wagons went when they left the fort. Some of the men thought he was getting too friendly with the Indians." "Did anyone see him with an Apache woman?" Murphy hesitated. "I don't know if I should be telling you this, but yes, several men saw him with a young Apache woman and her child. They met secretly, usually at night, up in the hills above the camp. Do you know what happened to them? After Thomas died, they disappeared. Some say Blackwood's men found them and took them back to the reservation. Others say they escaped into Mexico. But Mr. Whitmore, I've got to warn you, asking questions about this could be dangerous. Colonel Blackwood doesn't like people who interfere with his operations." "I'm not afraid of Blackwood." "You should be. He's got the territorial government in his pocket, and he's got soldiers who follow his orders without question. If he killed your son, he won't hesitate to kill you too." "Sadi," I thanked Murphy for his honesty and rode back toward town, but instead of heading home, I turned east toward the Apache reservation. If Ayana and Little Wolf were still alive, someone on the reservation might know where they were. The reservation was a sprawling collection of adobe buildings and crude shelters, home to nearly 1,000 Apache people who had been forced to abandon their traditional way of life. The conditions were deplorable: inadequate food, poor medical care, and constant supervision by hostile soldiers. I found the reservation agent, a thin man named Crawford, who seemed nervous about my presence. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm not sure why you're here, but I should tell you that civilians aren't usually allowed on the reservation without official permission. I'm looking for information about an Apache woman named Ayana and her son. They might have been brought here recently." Crawford's expression became guarded. "I'm afraid I can't help you with that." "Can't or won't? Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you leave now. This is not a place for civilians, and your questions could be misunderstood." I realized I wasn't going to get answers from Crawford, so I walked away from the agency building and approached a group of Apache women who were washing clothes by a stream. They looked at me with suspicion, but one older woman stepped forward. "You are looking for Ayana," she said in accented English. "You are the father of Thomas." "Yes. Do you know where she is?" "She is not here. She is hiding with her son in the mountains. Colonel Blackwood's men came looking for her many times, but she was too clever for them. Is she safe? For now, but she cannot hide forever. The soldiers are offering rewards for information about her. Some of our people are hungry enough to betray her. Can you get a message to her?" "Perhaps. What message?" "Tell her that Thomas's father wants to meet her. Tell her that I know the truth about what happened to my son, and I want to help her." The woman studied my face for a long moment. "You would accept an Apache woman as your daughter?" "If she was the woman my son loved, then yes." "And you would accept her mixed-blood child as your grandson?" "He is my grandson. Blood is blood." She nodded slowly. "Come to the old mission ruins tomorrow at sunset. Come alone. If you are followed, she will not appear." I thanked her and rode back to my ranch, my mind racing with plans. I had found a way to contact Ayana, but I also knew that time was running out. If Blackwood was still hunting her, it was only a matter of time before he found her hiding place. That night, I sat in my cabin, cleaning my rifle and checking my ammunition. I had a feeling that my meeting with Ayana would not be the end of this story. It would be the beginning of a much more dangerous confrontation. The next evening, I rode to the old Spanish mission that had been abandoned decades earlier. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. I dismounted and waited, my eyes scanning the ruins for any sign of movement. She appeared so quietly that I almost missed her. One moment I was alone among the crumbling walls, and the next moment she was standing in the doorway of the old chapel, holding a small boy in her arms. Ayana was beautiful in the way that desert flowers are beautiful, delicate but resilient, capable of surviving in harsh conditions. She was younger than I had expected, probably no more than 25, with long black hair and intelligent dark eyes. The boy in her arms had lighter skin and brown hair, but he had the same intelligent eyes as his mother. "You are Thomas's father," she said, her voice soft but wary. "Yes, and you are my daughter-in-law. I was never legally married to your son. The white man's law does not recognize our union. I don't care about the white man's law. Thomas loved you, and that's enough for me." She stepped closer, and I could see the exhaustion in her face, the strain of months of hiding and fear. "Thomas spoke of you often. He said you were a good man, but he was afraid you would not accept me. Thomas was wrong. I would have welcomed you into my family. Even knowing what I am, you are the woman my son loved. You are the mother of my grandson. That's all I need to know." She set the boy down, and he immediately hid behind her skirts, peering at me with curious but frightened eyes. "Little wolf," she said gently, "this is your grandfather, your father's father." The boy looked at me with Thomas's eyes, and I felt my heart break and heal at the same time. This was my grandson, the continuation of my family line, and he was afraid of me. "Hello, little wolf," I said, kneeling down to his level. "I'm very happy to meet you." He whispered something in Apache to his mother, and she smiled for the first time. "He says you have kind eyes like his father." He remembers Thomas? He remembers the man who brought him gifts and told him stories. He called Thomas Papa. I felt tears in my eyes. "Ayana, I know what happened to Thomas. I know he was murdered by Colonel Blackwood." Her face hardened. "Blackwood is an evil man. He killed my husband to silence him, and he has been hunting us ever since. I have evidence of his crimes. Evidence that Thomas gathered before he died. I can use it to bring him to justice." "Justice? There is no justice for Apache people in the white man's courts. There might be if we present the evidence to the right people in Washington. And what of Little Wolf and me? What happens to us while you seek your justice? You come home with me. You live on my ranch under my protection. You become my family. Colonel Blackwood will never allow that. He will come for us. Then we'll be ready for him." She studied my face in the fading light. "You would risk your life for us. You are my family. Thomas died protecting you. I won't let his sacrifice be in vain. And if we bring danger to your ranch, then we'll face that danger together." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well, but I must warn you. Colonel Blackwood is more dangerous than you know. He has killed before, and he will not hesitate to kill again. I'm not afraid of him. You should be. He is not just a corrupt soldier. He is a man who has lost his humanity. He enjoys causing pain." As if summoned by her words, we heard the sound of horses approaching. Ayana grabbed Little Wolf and pulled him behind a fallen wall, while I drew my rifle and peered through a gap in the stones. A dozen soldiers were riding toward the mission, led by a man in an officer's uniform. Even in the dim light, I could see the cruel smile on his face as he surveyed the ruins. "Ayana," he called out, his voice echoing among the stones, "I know you're here. Come out now, and I promise your death will be quick." Colonel Blackwood had found us, and now the real fight would begin. Chapter 3. "Ayana," Colonel Blackwood's voice cut through the desert evening like a blade. "You cannot hide forever. Come out now, and I will make your death quick. Continue to run, and I will make you suffer before you die." I crouched behind the crumbling wall of the old mission, my rifle trained on the soldiers spreading out among the ruins. Ayana held Little Wolf close to her chest, her hand covering his mouth to keep him quiet. The boy seemed to understand the danger instinctively, his eyes wide but silent. "You have something that belongs to the United States government," Blackwood continued, dismounting from his horse. "Information that could compromise military operations. Return it, and I might consider sparing the child." I could see him clearly now in the moonlight. Colonel Jeremiah Blackwood was a tall man with graying hair and cold eyes that seemed to find pleasure in the fear he inspired. He wore his uniform with the arrogance of a man who had never faced real consequences for his actions. "I know you're here, Ayana," he said, signaling his men to spread out further. "And I know you're not alone. Someone has been asking questions about your dead husband, stirring up trouble that was long buried. He was talking about me. Someone had told him about my visits to the mining camp and the reservation." "Mr. Whitmore," Blackwood called out, his voice now directed toward our hiding place. "Yes, I know you're here. Did you really think you could investigate my operations without my knowledge? This is my territory, and I know everything that happens in it." I felt Ayana's hand touch my arm. She leaned close and whispered, "There is a way out through the back of the chapel. If you create a distraction, I can get Little Wolf to safety. I'm not leaving you. You must. If they catch us together, they will kill all of us. If I escape with Little Wolf, you still have the evidence to bring Blackwood to justice. No, we face this together or not at all." Before she could argue, Blackwood's voice rang out again. "I'm going to count to 10. If you don't come out, I'll have my men burn this place down with you inside." I made a decision that would have made Thomas proud. I stood up and stepped out from behind the wall, my rifle still in my hands, but pointed at the ground. "I'm here, Blackwood. Let's talk." "Silas Whitmore, I should have known you'd be trouble, just like your son." He smiled that cold smile again. "Your boy was a naive fool who thought he could play hero. It got him killed. You murdered him. I eliminated a threat to military security. Your son was harboring a hostile Apache and interfering with legitimate operations. Your operations were theft and murder. Thomas had evidence of your crimes. Evidence that will never see the light of day, just like your son's widow and bastard child." I felt rage building in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. "What do you want, Blackwood?" "I want the woman and the child, and I want any documents or evidence your son might have left behind. And if I refuse, then you'll join your son in the grave." I was about to respond when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the distinctive click of a rifle being cocked. But it wasn't coming from Blackwood's men. It was coming from behind me. "Colonel," said a familiar voice, "you might want to reconsider your position." I turned to see Ezra Tombstone, the old miner who had been Thomas's friend, emerging from the shadows with a rifle trained on Blackwood. Behind him were 6 more men, all armed, all with expressions of grim determination. "Ezra," I said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "Your son saved my life once in a mine collapse. I owe him a debt." He raised his voice so Blackwood could hear. "Besides, word has gotten around about what really happened to Thomas. Turns out he had more friends than you knew. This is a military matter," Blackwood said, his confidence wavering slightly. "Civilian interference will not be tolerated." "Military matter," said another voice. This time it was Murphy, the mine supervisor. "Murder is a civilian matter, Colonel, and we have witnesses." I realized that these men had been planning this confrontation. They had known about my meeting with Ayana and had come prepared to support me. "You're outnumbered, Blackwood," I said. "Your men might be soldiers, but they're not killers like you. Are they really willing to die for your crimes?" I saw several of the soldiers glance at each other uncertainly. They had signed up to serve their country, not to participate in murder and corruption. "Sergeant Briggs," Blackwood snapped at his second-in-command, "arrest these men for interfering with military operations." But Sergeant Briggs hesitated. "Sir, these are civilians. We don't have authority to arrest them without cause. I'm giving you a direct order, Sergeant." "Sir, I'm not sure this is legal. Are you questioning my authority?" "No, sir. But if these men have evidence of criminal activity, shouldn't we investigate it through proper channels?" I saw the doubt in the sergeant's eyes and realized that even Blackwood's own men were beginning to question his actions. "Sergeant," I called out, "I have a letter written by my son before he died. It contains evidence of Colonel Blackwood's crimes. Would you like to see it?" "Don't listen to him," Blackwood ordered. "He's trying to undermine military discipline." But I was already pulling the letter from my jacket pocket. "This letter details systematic theft of government supplies, illegal dealings with Mexican traders, and the murder of Apache witnesses. It names names, provides dates, and includes locations where stolen goods were hidden." "That's enough." Blackwood drew his sidearm and pointed it at me. "I won't let you destroy everything I've built here." "Everything you've built is a lie," I said. "You're not serving your country, you're serving yourself. I've brought order to this territory. I've protected white settlers from Apache raiders. You've created the raiders by stealing the food meant to feed their families. You've turned peaceful people into desperate ones, and then used their desperation to justify your violence. The Apache are savages. They deserve the same justice as any other human being." Blackwood's hand was shaking as he held his pistol. "I won't let you destroy me. You've already destroyed yourself." That's when Ayana stepped out from behind the wall, still holding little Wolf. The moonlight illuminated her face, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't expected, not fear but determination. "Colonel Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the ruins, "I am Ayana of the Chiricahua Apache. You murdered my husband, you have hunted my child, and you have brought shame to the uniform you wear. You're a hostile Apache. You have no rights under military law. I have the rights of a human being, and I have evidence of your crimes." "What evidence?" "The evidence my husband gave me before he died. Names of the Mexican traders who bought your stolen goods, locations of the hiding places where you stored supplies before selling them, and the names of the Apache women and children you murdered to cover your tracks." Blackwood's face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I? Then explain why you have spent 2 years hunting one woman and her child. If we were no threat to you, why would you care if we lived or died?" I saw the logic of her arguments sinking in among Blackwood's men. They were beginning to understand that their commander had been using them to commit crimes. "Sergeant Briggs," I said, "I formally request that you place Colonel Blackwood under arrest for murder, theft, and treason." I don't have authority to arrest a superior officer. You have authority to prevent the commission of crimes, and you have a duty to protect innocent civilians." Sergeant Briggs looked around at his men, then at Blackwood, then at the armed civilians surrounding the ruins. "Colonel, I think we should return to the fort and sort this out through proper channels. We're not going anywhere until I've eliminated these witnesses." "Sir, I can't allow you to harm civilians." "You can't allow me? I'm your commanding officer." "Not if you're giving illegal orders, sir." That's when Blackwood made his final, fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering, he turned his pistol toward Little Wolf. "If I can't have justice, then neither can you." I was already moving before he finished speaking, throwing myself between Blackwood and the child. The bullet meant for my grandson tore through my shoulder, spinning me around and sending me to the ground. But my sacrifice gave Ezra Tombstone the clear shot he needed. His rifle cracked once, and Colonel Blackwood fell backward, his pistol flying from his hand. "Pa!" Little Wolf cried out, the first word I had heard him speak in English. He ran to me, where I lay bleeding in the dirt, his small hands touching my face with concern. "It's all right, boy," I said, looking up at him through waves of pain. "Grandpa's going to be fine. Ayana knelt beside us, tears streaming down her face. You saved my son's life. I saved my grandson's life. It's what grandfathers do. Sergeant Briggs approached us, his face grim. Mr. Whitmore, I'm placing my men under your authority until we can sort this out with the territorial government. That's not necessary, Sergeant. You're good men who are following a bad leader. Just make sure the evidence reaches the right people in Washington. I will, sir. I promise. 3 months later, I was sitting on the porch of my ranch house, watching Little Wolf chase chickens in the yard, while Ayana prepared dinner in the kitchen. My shoulder had healed well, and the territorial government had cleared me of any wrongdoing in Blackwood's death. The evidence Thomas had gathered led to a full investigation of corruption in the military administration. 6 officers were arrested, and new policies were implemented to prevent similar abuses in the future. More importantly, the Apache people in our region were finally receiving the supplies and support they had been promised. "Grandpa," Little Wolf said, running up to the porch, "Mama says dinner is ready." "All right, son, let's go eat." As we walked into the house together, I thought about Thomas and how proud he would be of his family. His son was growing up strong and healthy, his wife was safe and respected in the community, and his father had finally found peace. I had lost a son, but I had gained a daughter and a grandson. I had lost my solitude, but I had found my purpose. Sometimes the greatest redemption comes not from what we gain, but from what we choose to protect. The Whitmore family lived on, and Thomas's sacrifice had not been in vain. Did you enjoy this story of family, sacrifice, and redemption? Let me know in the comments which moment moved you most, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Old West stories that will touch your heart.